Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer. This is their number 3024-8-1.75-601. This is an epic double-acting spring hinge. So, first of all, it weighs over 11 pounds. Okay. This is a double-acting spring hinge, and the name Bommer is literally synonymous with spring hinges. The current owner of Bommer is the husband of the granddaughter of the founder, and if I'm not mistaken, they're two brothers, and they literally invented the category of self-closing spring hinges. And that's why Bommer is important when it comes to self-closing spring hinges. On a recent tour to Bommer, I was incredibly, not only fascinated, and ownership there indulged me for the better part of an entire afternoon, but an appreciation as to the process that it takes to manufacture hinges was absolutely given to me. Hinges, I can tell you, are the afterthought of the door and frame. Nobody thinks about the hinge. But I'll tell you this, I'm very familiar with how metal doors are manufactured. I'm familiar with how hinges are manufactured. And it does seem to me that manufacturing a hinge is a lot more difficult than manufacturing a steel door. So anyway, what is this hinge? This is a 3024. Now, if you know Bommer at all, you probably know them for their double-acting spring hinge, their 3029. That's the standard double-acting spring hinge with these big barrels on either side, and your door is going to double-act. Well, this is a variant of that in that it's a 3024. And what makes it a 3024 is this clamp, this big U-shaped piece of steel. If we remove that from the hinge, we'd have a 3029, okay? Albeit an 8-inch. This is an 8-inch size. The sizing by Bommer certainly is an indication of the size of the hinge, but really nowhere on the hinge is it going to be measured at 8-inch. What the size of the hinge actually refers to is how heavy of a door, how thick of a door, what's the size of the door that the hinge will handle. And the 8-inch comes into play when you're dealing certainly with substantially heavier doors. Okay. Now, there is information below this video in the extended description, and let's tackle that first, and then we'll tackle, you know what, let's dissect the part number first. 3024 means it's a clamp style hinge. That is most certainly what that means, where the door is going to fit into that clamp, and you're going to bolt it through the door altogether. And I'm going to pull up my catalog here, and I want to be able to relay to you the different sizes that it is possible to be manufactured in. There is a link below this video to a document called Product, it's actually called Cut Sheet, that will allow you to review the 3024. That link to the cut sheet will show you what this hinge looks like. Will tell you that the clamp flange is available from 4-inch through 8-inch sizes, and you can do the CL version, which is the same hinge, except that it will have a decorative ball tip on the end of the hinge, in 5, 6, or 7-inch sizes. The ball tip is a very common hinge. You will absolutely see that hinge in lots of places. If you take a trip to New York City and you're staying in any one of the countless hotels there that are not brand new, it's very likely that they're full of hundreds of Bommer style hinges or Bommer hinges. Bommer hinges are everywhere, is the bottom line. I just thought of a funny story that really exemplified how true that statement is. I was on a nuclear submarine. It's a museum piece, Bommer hinge inside of it. There was a court case one time where Bommer was involved, and the claim was made that the hinge was faulty. That didn't work. They were no good. Well, in the courtroom, the person representing Bommer was being questioned, and said, the attorney said, "Your hardware is no good. How do you defend your product?" And the person representing Bommer stated, "If you would just turn around, you'll see on that courtroom door that you just walked through, that's my product on that door. So you tell me if it's no good." the hardware is everywhere. Now, let's get back to the matter. The 3024 is a clamp style, so the different sizes, as you study the chart on the bottom of that cut sheet, you're going to see exactly where the size comes into play. Okay, so with a Bommer hinge, our first question is always, how thick is the door? That's always the first question, because that seems to be the most important characteristic when defining your hinge. The physical size of the hinge doesn't really so much matter. It's what job do you need the hinge to do? And we start by asking, how thick is the door? As you look at the table that's there, you're certainly going to notice that column of box clamp fits door thickness listed. While it's true, the box clamp will list the door thickness listed, but you have to order the hinge for that thickness of door. This client ordered a 3024-8-1.75. Well, that's 1 3/4. Okay. If you needed this for an 1.5-inch door, you're going to have to order a different hinge. The clamp is going to be too large. Sorry. 1 3/4 is what that's made for. It's got a little bit of bias on it, but when you clamp it down, those plates will come tight on the door. So it goes to show, it goes to state, if you had an 1 3/4 thick door, the only size available to you is the 8-inch. Unless, of course, you were to get fancy with mortising the face of the door so as to slip that door inside of here, but you wouldn't do that because it's the weight of the door that you're dealing with, the width of the door that you're dealing with that's going to define that. So the rest of the chart is going to show, are you installing 2 hinges or 3 hinges? Well, if you're installing 2 hinges in our 1 3/4 door, our 8-inch hinge, as a result of it being 1 3/4, you know what? Let's get this video going and looking at the actual cut sheet rather than me describing it to you. So let's take a look at the actual cut sheet. This is what's linked to down below in your video. Okay, so we had discussed this already, the size, and if you want those ball tips, well, here they are. That's not going to be a problem. And here's that chart. So if we're dealing with an 1 3/4 thick door, the next question ultimately becomes is how many hinges are you going to use? This client ordered 2 hinges. 2 hinges. So we are expecting that his door weight will not exceed 103 pounds and will not exceed 42-inch in weight. Okay. If you were to use 3 hinges, you're obviously going to increase the capability of what you're going to be able to handle. Now, they say a minimum door weight of 7 foot. And that doesn't mean that you can't use it on a door that's 6'8" or a door that's 4 foot. You can, but the way that this hinge was tested was designed to work on doors that are considered full-size doors. So if you were to get into using these hinges on an item that was just 5 foot tall, you might find that the operation is a bit too aggressive because that door is most likely not as substantial as it would be otherwise if it was a 7 foot tall door. Having spoken to the head engineer at Bommer for years, having met the gentleman, I can tell you that to say that there is incredible expertise involved in engineering at Bommer would be the understatement of the year. To say that pride in the product would also be no way to overstate that, in fact. These folks do it. I've been in their testing laboratory, and it's really an eye-opening experience. They've tested the hinge, and they know how well it's going to work. Meaning these numbers just simply aren't made up. They've actually been tested. You'll see the reference to the CL where necessary. So like I said, what is the thickness of the door? Then what's the weight of the door? So if you were dealing with a door that was 1.5 inches, you can go with a 6, 7, or 8-inch hinge, but what's the weight? How many hinges will you use? Same idea with an 1.25 inch door. You've got a couple of options here. How many hinges? What's the weight? Now, it's always best to use more spring hinges rather than less on a door, most certainly if you are unsure of how many you're comfortable using. But be mindful that the testing and the data that's here is rock solid and that you can depend on that. Now let's move back to reviewing the balance of the product. Now let's go through the rest of the dissecting of the part number now that we've looked at the cut sheet. So 3024, 8, we've talked about the sizes, the door thickness that has to be ordered appropriately. Then the last 3 digits are the finish. Well, this hinge is a 601. 601 means bright black japanned is what that stands for. Okay. You want a black hinge, it'll be 601. Now, being made of steel, Bommer can very confidently do almost any finish that you want. I've been to their plating plant. They tout 33 finishes that they can do. There will, of course, be limitations based on the base material of what can be done, but suffice it to say that the finish that you want, they are probably going to be able to accommodate. Now, and I'm going to pull it up on a screen here. We have listed 600 for prime coat, 601 for bright black japanned, 603 for zinc, it would be a shiny zinc plated steel, 632 for polished brass, 633 for satin brass, 639 for satin bronze, 640 for oil rub bronze, 646 for satin nickel, 651 for polished chrome, and 652 for satin chrome. So lots of finishes that you can do right from Bommer without any trouble whatsoever. Now, a couple of quick notes on the finishes. Most definitely these hinges are almost always going to be made to order. There'll always be a factory lead time. They're a custom hinge. You don't sell them very often, and they're not sitting on the shelf. The finish just isn't going to really matter in terms of the lead time. The least expensive is going to be your 600 prime coat or your 601 bright black japanned. If you want to paint them, order the 600 prime coat. No reason to order satin chrome and then try to paint over that. Another tip will be the 603 is a shiny, reflective silver color. So if you're looking for a less expensive version of 651 polished chrome, go with the 603. It's going to be a lot less expensive. If you're looking for just a chrome type color, maybe go with the 603. It's less expensive than the satin chrome, but it's literally zinc plated is what it is. And it's going to definitely look zinc plated. Now the rest of the information down below in the extended description, let's take a look at that. Box clamp flange, non-template, non-handed. Non-template means that these holes for the screws, they don't meet any standard. That's just where Bommer will put their holes for the screws to go to the jam. Okay, we're going to get to the installation and the template, and we'll go over that stuff. These holes for the bolts that are going to go through the door, they don't meet any standard locations. They don't meet any. They're not going to match anyone else who makes this hinge. And if there's someone else makes this hinge, I've never heard of that company. Again, made of steel, 11 1/4 pounds of steel, absolutely steel. I almost said stainless steel. There's nothing about this that precludes it from being used in an exterior application, but it's ferrous based, so be mindful. These are going to a park district in northeastern Illinois, and I doubt that they're exterior use. Can you use them outside? Sure, but like anything else exposed to the elements, ultimately they'll fail as a result of that exposure. Bright black japanned, that is the 601 in the part number, for an 1 3/4 thick door, and we talked about the other thicknesses you can do in not only an 8-inch but the other sizes. Minimum door height is 7 foot. 2 hinges, 103 pounds maximum weight. 3 hinges, that'll get you up to 143 pounds. Maximum door width, 3'6" for 2 hinges and 4 foot for 3 hinges. Box clamp type door flange is attached to the door with through bolts and nuts. Jam flange is surface applied to the jam. We'll go over that. Clamp flanges are not adjustable. You're going to place them, you're going to mark your holes, you're going to drill holes, mark your holes, drill those holes, and put the through bolts on there. Thickness of the door must be selected, must be specified at the time of order. It is packaged with screws, and you will indeed get screws. What's interesting about this is they've sent only machine screws for the jamb, okay, maybe you've got a steel frame, but they've sent machine screws. By all means, indicate in the comment field the net length that you would like, pardon me, indicate in the comment field the type of screws for the jamb. There's just no reason to not get the screws that you require. Now, this client happened to tell us that it was a steel frame, so they're going to get 1224 flat undercut head machine screws. And then, of course, those bolts. But indicate in the comment field. Let us know, and we'll endeavor to make sure that we ship it out appropriately. You don't want to have to run to the hardware store to get some screws. Permits doors to open in either direction and automatically return to the closed position. Well, that's certainly true. This is going to be a double-acting hinge. We'll go 90, back to 0, to negative 90, back to 0. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the installation instructions. Provides maximum protection for doors subject to normal use of lift trucks due to resiliency of spring support and shock-absorbing reaction of flexible mounting. Provides maximum protection for doors subject to normal abuse of lift trucks due to the resiliency of spring support and shock-absorbing reaction of flexible mounting. I'm not sure what's really flexible about the mount. I would say these are very durable, high-quality springs that will be inside of there, and will take, that could be expected to perform under normal conditions. Adjustable spring tension permits power and speed adjustment. We're going to get to adjusting it. Every order that you place will have a tension rod, and that's the one that's for this size hinge, and we'll go over how to do that. No hanging strip is needed. There are certain double-acting hinges in the world that require a piece of material applied to your jamb for you to then get your hinge applied to. The design of this hinge does not require any trim to be applied. You can slap that right to your cased opening frame without any other material necessary. Now we're going to get into the template and the installation instructions, and let's dig into that. Okay, now moving forward with the product review, we're now looking at the document called Template. And Template is a document that is partial installation instructions as well, because it goes over the dimensional properties of the item. So I'm not going to beleaguer those points here in this video, because you can simply refer to the document. But I can tell you that the height of the clamp is indeed 8-inch. So I had said earlier that nowhere on there does it really measure 8-inch. Well, the clamp height is indeed 8-inch. Again, does it really matter if that clamp was 8-inch or 7.5 or 8.5? Well, it does, but it doesn't really matter in terms of the door weight and width and applied per the quantity of hinges. The reason that this document is important is because of everything that is up here. Let's pull this drawing down. Everything that's up here is what makes this document important. Okay? And that basically means, what size does the door need to be? If you're installing these and you have a door that's already manufactured, you have a door that's got a net width on it, what you don't have is a frame opening. Well, okay, so you're going to use this calculation as seen here to determine exactly how large your frame is supposed to be. You have a choice to make, however. The choice that you have to make is whether or not you're doing mortised or not mortised. Okay, so are you going to mortise the door over the clamp flange itself, basically in this area? Okay, are you going to basically take that door and notch the edge of the door out so that you can get the clamp flange seated into a small notch in the door? Now, if you do that, you're going to have the ability to go with a different A dimension. So actual door width plus A would then be your frame opening. Okay. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to surface mount this hinge, couple of things that you'll have to keep in mind. Your rough opening is going to be your door size plus the A dimension, which is basically 11/16, basically. It is, not basically, it is 11/16. You might also come at it from the perspective of, I already have a rough opening. Okay, I already have a finished opening. This is fixed, and you cannot change it. Let's say that that opening is 36 inch. Well, 36 minus your A dimension will be your net door width. You'll then determine, am I mortising it or am I not? Okay. So that's where you have to go in terms of determining your next step on sizing your door. To get the door installed, you obviously have to have a net door width. Now, if you're doing a pair of doors, you're going to use a different dimension. When we get to the installation instructions, they are not going to be discussing typical treatment to a door that would be a radiused edge. You could very certainly take your door edge. You've got a square edge door. Well, you're going to need a square edge door over on your hinge side, guaranteed. But you could also, in this area, take your door and then radius it. If you were to radius the door edge, you would be able to accomplish a slightly smaller margin, because as these doors are going to double, if you have a pair of doors, if they're literally going to double act against each other, that margin is what's going to allow these doors to double act in the way in which you need. So that's why you've got to have one of these two dimensions in order to allow those doors to move against each other. Okay. If you were to radius the door, usually a radius is about 2 3/4 inch, which makes for a, pardon me, you're going to be really looking to do a radius of maybe about 1 1/4 inches, depending on your door thickness, depending on the treatment to the door. You know, you're going to end up trying to use a round over bit that's going to be 2 3/4 or 3 inch diameter, and that's an awfully large bit, awfully expensive bit, not one that you would want to order unless you had to. So these installation instructions are really predicated on basically having two square edges. Okay, they know that you're going to be able to move these doors without any trouble in a square edge scenario. Notes: invert hinges on one door of a pair for proper centering. Basically, the tension collar, which we're going to go over later in the video, you'll have, if you're doing a pair of doors, where the tension collar is going to be, you'll place it on this side or this side, whichever, towards the top or towards the header. But then on the other leaf, you're going to turn the hinges over 180 degrees, and that allows the hinges to stand true to the face of each other, Bommer has found. Okay, and then they've got a reference here to the screws that are used, 5/16 by 18 through bolts, and we'll get to that when we talk about the packaging. Now let's move on to the installation instructions. Okay, now let's jump into the installation instructions, which are linked to down here, and they are included with your hardware as well. So, and we're going to go over visually how to set the tension after we get through the installation instructions. But you know how to size your door, or how to create a rough opening based on your door size. And what these are showing you is top view, tension holes on top, door rotating around jam flange. And what they do, what these two drawings here are showing you is how the hinge moves through its cycle. You know, you're going to carry the clamp and this entire apparatus to this spring in this direction, and then when it comes back the opposite direction, they're just showing you that it's only going to be this portion that's going to move. Okay. they're also showing you what it looks like in terms of when the tension holes are on the bottom, and we'll go over that nearer the end of the video. If you have a pair of doors, as we said earlier, tension holes up on one hinge, tension holes pointed towards the bottom on the other hinge. How to set the tension is talked about here. We're going to go over that. When the tension holes are on the top, you'll move your tension rod clockwise to increase tension. And when you flip that hinge upside down, you'll rotate the tension rod counterclockwise to increase tension. We'll go over that. Now, before we get to the actual instructions and the notes that they have here, the bottom portion is the business end. This, if you're doing 3 hinges, this is what you want to do. The way that the hinge was designed, was engineered, was to literally have 2 hinges soldier stacked at the top. I was in a bed and breakfast about a month ago, traveling through North Carolina, seeing a couple of manufacturers, and the owner of the bed and breakfast said, "Look what my carpenter did. He installed those hinges wrong. This is how he installed them." And he indeed had 2 of them soldier stacked at the top, and I did let the client know that actually the carpenter did it exactly the way that it was intended to be done. 70%, 70% of the weight of the door is borne by that top hinge. 70%. When you have a spring hinge, or any hinge for that matter, you are literally going to have all of the 70% of the weight of the door borne by that top hinge. Okay? Now, what you end up getting into is a situation where when you have a hinge that is carrying almost all of the weight of the door, you're going to end up seeing that the door doesn't actually just simply rotate in a nice even arc along the vertical axis of pivoting. What's actually going to happen is when the doors move in and out, they really move in an elliptical sort of fashion, so that they don't rotate in a perfect circle. They're actually going to rotate elliptically. So that door is actually going to move out this way ever so slightly as it rotates, so that you are really stretching out a little bit because of the weight of the door. Okay? It's going to increase the margin up here ever so slightly as it moves. So if that designed gap is whatever it is up here, as that door moves in and out, it's going to open up a little bit over here, and it's going to shrink down a little bit over here. You need 2 hinges at the top to keep those margins tight, because there's a lot more work that the top hinge or hinges are doing compared to the bottom hinge. Okay, so that's why it needs to be that way. Now, looking at the rest of the installation instructions, remove the spring tension from each barrel. When the hinge arrives to you, the tension will be removed from the hinge barrel. There won't be anything that you will need to do in particular. There will be no tension. Again, the box clamp may be mortised or surface applied. Align the center line of the door with the center line of the frame. So what they're really telling us is to be sure that you get your center line. All of this must be exactly centered. You know, if you want to bias it towards one side of the frame, that's really not going to be a problem. but you need to have it all centered in relationship to itself. If you have a pair of doors, you're going to need them to be on the same vertical center line. Okay, so that needs to be maintained. Again, for best alignment, tension pins up on one side, tension pins down on the other side. When we go over, I'm going to illustrate that in a moment. Do not exceed 5 holes of tension. We'll show you what that tension looks like. Place the door in the so what you're going to do to install these, once you have everything attached, you're going to get the doors in the opening. You're going to shim the doors into perfect position. You're then going to go about attaching your screws to everything. Place the door in the closed position, wedge the door up from the floor until it's plumb. Once you have the doors positioned correctly, you're then going to go about setting your tension as is discussed here so that you've got some tension set. Otherwise, if you didn't, the doors would just literally clank out of the opening or into the jamb, actually, and would be not a good condition to have the door in relationship to the frame, because of the weight of the door could damage the hinge or pull a screw out or screws out, damage the frame as well. Insert the tension rod into the tension adjustment hole, which is the tension collar. Rotate in the direction of the arrow. Insert tension pin and remove. As you rotate the tension pin, as you rotate the tension rod, you'll insert a pin. Increase the tension on the top hinge if the door sags or return action is too slow. That bottom hinge doesn't do a lot of work. It's the top hinge that does almost all the work. So now let's move on with this, showing you physically how to set the tension on the hinge itself. Now, touching on the very last portion of this video, let's go over how to set the tension on this hinge. So back to the installation instructions. You're going to get for every order that you place, you're going to get 1 tension rod, big piece of steel. That's what that is. For every hinge that you order, you're going to get 2 tension pins. Bommer takes great pride in making sure that the quantity of tension pins are at least adequate for the job. It is a very rare occurrence that there is not the proper tension pins in the package. Now, you've got a tension rod, 2 tension pins for every hinge. The rest of the packaging was the machine screws for the jamb. And then, of course, your hex cap screws. Those are just going to simply go through the door. Okay. You might want, this is what the factory sends, 4 of these. You'll need, of course, 4 of them to get through the clamp and through your door. Okay. Now, tension. This is the tension collar that we've been talking about. Tension collar. You'll notice that there's one up here, but not at the bottom. If you're doing a single door, install the tension collar pointed towards the header. If you're doing a double door, collar up on one side, collar down on the other side. Okay, it's that simple. When the tension collar is pointed towards the top, insert a tension rod and turn it clockwise. It also states there in the direction of the arrow. I don't see an arrow. They are not always on the hinge. But it's clockwise is the bottom line. Now, as you rotate it clockwise, you're going to feel tension. A lot of it, in fact. Tension hole. As you rotate it, drop a pin into that hole. Then it'll hold tension. You'll be able to remove your tension rod, ratchet, move it over, increase tension. Don't exceed 5 holes. Okay, that's how you do it. Same thing on the other side. Okay, set tension. I would probably put 4 holes of tension on the door to get them so that they hang. So as I was saying earlier, that door is going to swing double acting like this, but when you've got all that weight on a door, what I was attempting to describe earlier was how that door will actually come out of the opening and then back in. So elliptically. Anyway, so now we've talked about tension. That's just simply how you set the tension. You need 2 tension pins because there are 2 tension rods. Use the original equipment from the manufacturer. Don't stick anything else in there. There have literally been lawsuits about people harming themselves on a non-original, non-factory original pin because they've made contact with that and have hurt, people have gouged themselves. Use the factory original material. You're not going to hurt yourself with these pins at all. Okay, at least I don't have all the facts, but using the factory original material is the way to go. That's simply it. Okay, there's not really a lot else to go over in terms of setting the tension. We've discussed, I think, every facet possible of this hinge. The name Bommer is again synonymous with spring hinges, obviously double acting. Whether it be this odd variant of a 3029, they make spring hinges that will handle substantially heavier doors than these as well. They have hinges that will get into the 300 plus pound rating, and we just recently supplied some of these heavy duty hinges to a company who did some sort of heavy manufacturing that involved furnaces and ovens, and they were closing off doors to keep the heat on one side of the structure. Whether it be large, epically large double acting spring hinges, or more commonly, you're in the restaurant, that double acting door from the diner to the kitchen, very likely Bommer hinges. Lots of imitators out there. There's no doubt about that. But be mindful, regardless of the spring hinge that you're using, if you're using some single acting spring hinges, of which Bommer makes a full complement of, for a variety of different door manufacturers, meaning the location of the holes on the leaf will be dependent on the door manufacturer. The Bommer material is labeled and listed, for use on fire-rated doors. Did you know that NFPA 80 requires, that standard requires that hinges be certified, listed and labeled, visually labeled for use on fire-rated doors? Don't accept hinges that are not if you've got fire-rated doors, because it is a violation of the integrity of the fire rating of that opening. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Any questions on this epic Bommer 3024-8-1.75 and a 601 finish, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.